So let's write our test case here. So here, let me all insert test method, and I will call it as test serialize and deserialize. Okay. And as mentioned in our previous coding demo code, that I always prefer to use display name so that I can customize whatever the test unit test should be called. So I will call it test basic serialization and deserialization for Java Pojo using memory buffer. Okay. Like these details are good so that we can later on when we come back here, we know what this test case is for. So also you have noticed that in our previous test case for chapter 1 with marketData with no fields, we are using a file here and then having a serialize and deserialize as a separate unit test cases. But for the memory buffer, we are doing both serialize and deserialize test in the same unit test case, because as we discussed that with the memory buffer, it cannot have once the JVM shutdowns, then in that case the memory, everything in the memory would be erased, and we cannot reconstruct the object again, because it's and also the separate unit test case, when it runs, it will initialize again. So it's very much similar to like running it after the JVM restart. So once we do the test serialize, that can mimic actually a JVM run, and after that it will write to the file, and then when we run the test deserialize method, there also it's the same scenario that it will restart again. It will call the setup method again, and then only run this. So this is the reason that why we are for the memory buffer, because memory is volatile. It cannot restore those byte arrays after the JVM restart. We cannot mimic that. So using this, then now let's start writing our code. So I'll write memory, okay, with memory buffer, and Control Alt V. So it will. I'll just use this as marketData. That's it. And because we are using, I'll just use final var. We are using Java 11, so it's var. Okay, and now let me set some values for it. So set security ID. I will use Apple stock, and marketData dot set time. Normally should be the time which has been sent in the long epoch time, but just for the sake of this unit test, I will just mark it as something else. We can choose whatever values we want to put it in our unit test. It doesn't matter that it should be exactly the same value. So set open, again I will choose some random value, say 160.3D. Okay. Set high, low. Okay, and I will again give some random numbers, say 163.1. Okay, so I also set level 1 as true. Now let's serialize and write to the memory buffer. And as we discussed in the theoretical video in the previous one, so we will use a ByteArrayOutputStream. So let me create one instance, new ByteArrayOutputStream. Control Alt V. Okay, and I will just call it as bout and mark it as final var. Okay. Now again we have to use something as try with resources. but only for object output stream. As we know that byte array output stream, it doesn't request to close the stream. So let me again type byte array output stream and pass this object that we created. And also I will wrap it over object output stream as a wrapper here. Okay. Showing me something. Okay. We already introduced it. And I will use it as final where OS, which is object output stream. And let me reformat it a bit. Okay. And I will use it inside try block. Okay. Sorry guys, I actually have to use buffered output, not because ByteArray output stream we already created outside this. Now we have to create buffered output stream, not ByteArray. Sorry. And as you see that now we have to declare some exceptions, some checked exceptions. So IO exception is already there. So here we are going to serialize but before serializing, let me write some debug statements before serialization. Okay. And I will use System.out.data marketData, right? Okay. And now we finally use writeObject method. And we store this in our memory buffer. So what we are doing here is that we created our ByteArray output stream, and then we create a wrapper of buffered output stream. As suggested that it's always recommended to use buffered output stream for the performance. It increases a lot. And object output stream is the final wrapper, which will use the writeObject method to write the serialized data, market data, into this byte array. And this byte array output stream will be having internal buffer of byte arrays, which will store it. The buffer information. Okay. Now this is how we serialize it now, and now let's deserialize it in the same JVM. Deserialize and read. Okay, this is a better comment.